So I want to share some tips and prompts for using Notebook LM and Notebook LM Plus, which just came out in the past couple days in course design. I'm Andrew Sears. I'm the president of City Vision University, and I want to talk about the idea of crossing the chasm. So this is a book that was written about technology, and the main point behind it is that most attempts at innovation start really at this like bleeding edge of innovation and never make it to, the iPhone is kind of an example of the first smartphone to cross the chasm to become, designed for the average person. This is kind of like the average person, right? Now, what happens is you have in ed tech AI products, you have these gee whiz uses in most activities happening here. And then there's AI in course design, and our students don't want gee whiz stuff. I mean, they might see it and think, okay, that's nifty. But it's what they really want is impactful, transformative courses. So what we're trying to do is whenever we do design, how do we design things here? A lot of the stuff, if you look at all the ed tech AI startups, one of the popular ones, Nectar AI, student-facing chatbots, in my assessment, they're still here for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest ones is we just haven't figured out what's the pedagogical implications. It's kind of like saying, hey, these new things, e-bikes are out. So we have a course in teaching biking. We're going to give all our students e-bikes, and then half the students aren't pedaling anymore. They're just, running their e-bikes, and then people aren't learning. So, you have to think about how is this fitting into your pedagogy, and that's one of the biggest challenges. But I would argue that Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM and Google's Learnabout are really the first attempts at crossing the chasm. I'm seeing some things from textbook vendors like Cengage AI, and I think that this will be interesting. Um, so that's kind of the big picture. Now, I want to get into actually what are the steps for using Notebook LM. So here's what I do is I go through and I work to add content to Notebook LM. So I have a course design blueprint. So I'll add that. I'll add the syllabus. I'll add the core books as PDF. And you have to decide. And I'm going to put this on YouTube. If you own the books, it's kind of an ethical gray zone. If you convert the Kindle books to PDF so you can import them into this, I personally feel okay with that. There's different websites like Z Library where you can get them. Um, but that's only if you own them. It's not ethical if you're using those things to pirate books. And I also like using books and related courses to bridge between them. I import key videos and articles, um, and importing standards. So I'll use an example of how I did this on family counseling. Now, this is the new Notebook LM, and that you can see all these different things that I added. I added the textbooks. This is the course design document. I added some YouTube videos. You can see I added TAP 21 standards, and I think I added K-CREP standards in here somewhere, and Lumina Foundation. Um, and then you can see I've tracked a lot of notes, and this is where you can interact, to ask questions. Now, so that's the basic setup that I did for that. Now, what's the strength of AI? One of the things I think AI is going to radically change pedagogy in the next 50 years, and that books by their nature are siloed. And that makes our courses and subjects by nature siloed. Um, AIs are not siloed. AIs are interdisciplinary by nature. And so, you take a general subject, and this is important for us as a Christian institution. So we got, the values of Jesus, justice, technology. So usually we'll have Christian integration, that's our Jesus value. And then you have justice integration. Um, and it makes it easy for us to create those bridges. So for an example, in the family counseling course, we have a K-CREP aligned and LPC aligned family counseling textbook. But then there's a Christian integration book that's basically written to pair with that book, but then in addiction specific, addiction in the family, what every counselor knows. So these are all kind of their own, silos, but what you can do is use the AI to create better bridges between those. So here's some sample prompts of what I've used. So correlate the chapters of addiction in the family, what every counselor needs to know, with the related chapters of family therapy and overview. So in the past, I would ask people to, create a course outline, and honestly, they misalign the chapters. Like I'd get into it and they'd misalign the chapters. Now, the AI is not going to always get it right either. So you got to make sure that they know it's right. Um, some other things that I did is, in this main book, I said that I asked it to identify the case studies in the books. In some cases, it did a good job. Some cases, it didn't. But I also had them summarize those. Um, and then, there's other things you can do, and I don't recommend this. This is more to get ideas. But, one of the things that's helpful in writing prompts is you need to let Notebook LM know, what their persona is, what it's called. So, and the new version, you can actually give it a permanent persona, and that's the plus version. You can give it a permanent persona, and I'll show you how I did that. Um, well, I think I can actually go ahead and just show you that now. So in this, where is it? Is it under settings? No, that's not it. Um, Somewhere in here you set the persona. Oh, here it is, right here. Okay, so I said expert faculty, PhD style, helping me generate content and assignments for master's level counseling students at a Christian university. The majority of students will be Christians working in Christian residential recovery programs like Gospel Rescue Missions of the Salvation Army. Some students will be working in secular contexts, counseling non-Christian clients. That's a lot of information. You can do up to 500 words, but that's going to help. You can also, in the advanced version that you have to pay for, you can choose the response length. I'm always annoyed that it's just a lot shorter than I want, so I want it to be longer. Um, and so that essentially is given a context for all the answers. Um, so in that way, I don't have to put that before each prompt. Now, one of the strengths, if I had to say what is the best strength of AI, it's in drawing connections. So, you know, I recognize that motivational interviewing is really important in addiction counseling, probably the top technique in addiction counseling. So if you're going to cross family therapy with addiction counseling, I want to understand how to make that bridge. And then I want to have assignment questions to make that bridge. So I asked it, which model of family therapy is most similar to motivational interviewing? And it, gave a good response. So this is helping me think about, what are the connections? And then the other thing is I created a series of prompts to try to bridge common issues that counselors are going to face in ministry contexts with Bowen theory. So consider how, workaholism might be viewed as fusing with work. How might the concept of emotional fusion relate to addiction? So emotional fusion is a term in Bowen theory. And then um, there, so basically, after maybe 8 different prompts, worked with it to create a paper on emotional fusion and addiction, a complex interplay. Because what I wanted to do, Bowen theory, in terms of Christian integration, probably is the number one theory that's going to translate well to Christian integration. And then I wanted to be able to bridge that for addiction. So basically what I did is I worked to design some content around that. And you can see there's a paper that I worked in this to kind of relate those. And I put the note at the bottom, the summary was generated with assistance by NotebookLM. Now I've fact checked this, but I'm gonna have Evan fact check this also because sometimes I mean the main downside I would say of this is that, if I ask the question 2 or 3 different ways, there's a little bit of overlap between the responses. But the idea is I'm trying to create fairly generic content to bridge concepts. So this is another one, explain the philosophical assumptions and limitations of essentially this is, the scientific worldview. Um, and then explaining to counseling students how telling their story can be a form of narrative therapy. So I wanted to do an assignment where the students are going to tell their own story on their family of origin, but I wanted to help them better understand how that relates to that week's reading. So, um, and then this is one of the questions that I asked them later. So does that make sense? So a lot of what I am trying to do is, coming back to this diagram, most of our assignments are at these intersections. And what I'm trying to do is strengthen the relationship at these intersections for the students and then asking questions that are bridging those assignments. So that's what I did for this kind of emotional fusion and addiction and things along those lines. Um, okay, so let me just kind of do a walkthrough on how I did this for, week 2 in this course, Family Counseling and Addiction. So I asked um, NotebookLM for summaries of chapters for each book and for key videos. So I had a good grip on those, and I fact checked them and you should always fact check because as we've noted, um, I don't know, about a quarter of the time it just makes stuff up. And one of the big limitations is sometimes you tell it to check this book, and instead of checking the book you imported, it's checking a summary off the internet. And if it's going off a summary of the internet, it just makes stuff up. And it sounds plausible, but it's not correct. So then ask, Notebook LM how the chapters interrelate to each other. So I wanted to relate codependency to Bowen theory. Um, and then I, ask myself, what are the key concepts, applications, and practical challenges our students will face in their contexts related to the material. So Bowen theory in relationship to codependency. For the layperson, that's really the term that's going to relate back to, Bowen theory. A lot of professionals don't like that term because it's too inexact. But addiction, ministry dynamics, workaholism, and their own family of origin. So, and then genograms as a tool to reflect on their own family of origin. So, and then I asked Notebook LM to connect these concepts to help them, better understand. And then I designed using Notebook LM. Now, this is really important. If I had to say, what is the main point that I want to get across to people who work for City Vision and in the future, there are things that it's good to actually let the machine do most of the work. So something like this document here, I feel fine having that be 90% AI. Assignments, I put about 80% of my work whenever I design a course into designing the assignments because that's where most of the learning. Students learn by doing, and I put a lot of work into the assignments. If you're outsourcing assignment design to Notebook LM or an AI, you might as well just quit because that's the main value you have. And so I will, maybe use 20% of an assignment design. And I'll ask, 20 different questions, getting ideas, but I'm writing 80% of that. I might cut and paste small portions. So this is the main point that I want to get across. Because the reality is if I ask a faculty member to design an assignment and they use Notebook LM to do that, and their, Notebook LM is doing 90% of the work. I could have written a better assignment because I'm really good at prompt design. I've been doing prompt design. I've written probably at this point, even though it's only been out for a few months now, probably about 1,000 prompts. So, and I've been working with AI, prompts for a while, and I'm a computer scientist, so I know how to write these prompts fairly well. So most faculty are not going to be better than me at prompt design or better than the reality is instructional designers. But, they're going to be better at writing stuff, more from scratch. So does that make sense? Um, so, relating this back to the actual course, this is the course, and let me make this a little bigger. So, I have all this material. So what I'm trying to do in this week two is I'm trying to, create interconnections in this material. I then use Notebook LM to and I get the summaries, from this material, so I have a good grip of, all of these. And sometimes I'll go deeper into the material. Um, I use Notebook LM to generate these two Google Docs. I use Notebook LM, especially for some of these longer videos like this narrative therapy, and make sure I understand, what they're referring to. One of the other things I do is I'll, especially if there's a lot of references in one of these, I'll ask it to outline all the references in an hour-long presentation. And then I'll actually do more research on those references. Um, and then, down here is where I'm doing, the different work on this. Now, on the case studies, I'll talk about how to do that. But the instructions that I did on this were, I did almost 100% of the design on those instructions. So, um, okay. So prompts for case studies. So this is what I found works for case studies. Um, First, you create the draft case study, and you have to do this in separate steps. So, design a case study story that can help students apply a narrative therapy model to a family. And then um, I wanted to contextualize it. So I said one of the family members has a very negative personal narrative because of their own history with addiction. Add details, and this is just something you learn over time of like, how do you get better prompts? Add details to the story to make it seem realistic and lifelike. You should focus primarily on providing the story of the case rather than assignment elements, because in the past it was writing a case and it was writing the assignment, and both were not good. It would do like a one paragraph case. So this got me a strong case. And then what I did is I said, create a draft assignment for that case. So, could you write a case study assignment using a case story? And the student should apply in particular on applying the concepts and suggestions from chapter 14 of family therapy and overview, in fact, chapter 11 of family therapy, a comprehensive Christian appraisal. Now, even though I said don't use AI for course design, this was brilliant of like bringing out specific concepts out of those chapters that just would have been difficult for me to think about. So then out of that, then I, in this case, rewrite 20 to 40% of it quickly. Um, it's actually pretty good at writing cases. So in this case, we kept more of it. Um, and so you have to figure out what you're going to rewrite. So, but doing it in this approach, we were able to get some pretty strong cases. So the other thing is that I've been using this for is translating theory into practice. So, what are the most common interventions related to addiction in family counseling? So, interventions are, what are you actually going to do in family counseling? And so it gave, a lot of ideas, and then relating that back to assignments. Um, Role play assignments in Zoom. So, design a role play assignment with one student as a counselor, one as a client with addiction, and one family member with a client. The client's very remorseful. The role play should focus on the client completing steps 5 and 8 of the 12 steps, acknowledging how their addiction has hurt the family. And it came up with some, pretty good material. Now, some other things I found, and Brian, you can, decide whether this works or not, because I'm kind of skeptical, but it could work. Which CAP 21 competencies does week 2 of this course address? Which K-CREP competencies is week 2 address? So I would, if I were doing this myself, I would do that for every week, but I would also do about half of it myself. The other one could be, for leveling, this is where I was aligning it, with standards. So um, degree qualifications profile for the Lumina Foundation, to align, with that. And then also, are there any assignments in this course that seem like they're written more at the associate's or bachelor's level? I don't think I found any problems with that, but you could potentially find problems. And honestly, whenever I've done accreditation site visits of other schools, this is probably the number one problem I see. I see master's courses all the time with most of their assignments being written at the freshman level. It's just like facts, tell me the facts, define blah blah blah. That's a freshman level question. That's not a, master's level question. So, okay, so this is kind of a big summary. So spectrum of appropriate use of AI in course design. Um, Best fit, severely problematic. So generating generic content like Wikipedia. So I'll just use an example in another course that I was working on. I needed to explain the concept of what it means to be theologically conservative and theologically liberal. And I also needed to explain the differences between being, approaches to hermeneutics, interpreting the Bible from a theologically liberal and theologically conservative perspective. I couldn't find a good article anywhere on the internet on that, so I just used that for that. Using AI to assist in curating content. Man, there's like 100 videos for any given course. They're an hour long. I'm not going to sit through 100 hours of videos to try to figure out what's the best video to use, but it's fairly easy to have the AI write a summary of an hour-long video, and it takes, 30 seconds to go through it. So then generating content, connecting ideas for assignments and scaffolding, those are most of the prompts that I talked about. And, using AI to screen and summarize video content, generating generic case studies, using AI to bridge theory and practice, formative multiple choice quizzes. And I use formative because honestly, I don't think summative quizzes, I wouldn't trust them to do that. I think faculty need to be more involved in those. So formative, AI for chapter summaries, and I put this in the middle because about a quarter of the cases it just made stuff up. So you have to check, and you don't want to be writing questions on a made up chapter. Ideas for assignments and questions, and then writing whole assignments, I think is severely problematic. So getting into avoiding misuse of AI. So, we all should hold faculty and instructional designers to standards similar to students in the ethical use of AI. So, we these are the type of problems that can occur. So faculty create assignment questions that are based on chapter summaries that are completely incorrect, wrong chapters or made up. Um, you know, One of the big problems with Notebook LM, this is the number one reason why I went for the plus version, was it was limited to, I think, 50,000 words. So that meant, any books over 250 pages, it basically started making up stuff. And that's problematic. So, and it is incredibly convincing on its chapter summaries. Like, it has fooled me many, many times because it's using the right language, but it's making stuff up. Um, then creating assignments that are missing key instructions that would be essential for students to complete the assignments. Um, AI is really good at providing kind of skeletons, that, the frame of the house, but it's not good at finishing the house. So like whenever I thought about like if I were a student, would I be able to actually complete this assignment? Usually about 20% of the instructions were missing. So those are some examples. Do you want to use formal or informal AI citations? Man, it's crazy trying to use formal AI citations for this type of work. So my leaning is to use informal, so that's at the bottom. I say this summary was generated with assistance by NotebookLM using the materials in this course. It was reviewed for accuracy and edited by CVU faculty. That's how we use it. Um, all right, so this is so consideration um, in using AI in course design. What is the changing role? The SME's role is to add value to anything generated by AI. So rewrite, review AI ideas, and write. You know, as I stated before, faculty who rely nearly 100% on AI output are going to be less effective than instructional designers with expertise in AI prompt engineering. And in many cases, I'm working as the instructional designer with faculty. Um, and just the reality is, a lot of instructional designers, they're going to be learning to live and breathe by prompt engineering. So the average faculty member is not going to be as good at that unless you want to develop that as a core competency. Understanding the connections between knowledge and the field to know the questions to ask. That's honestly, one of the biggest things, is knowing what are the questions to ask and understanding of best practices from real world experience. So I'll use an example with Dina. I had her, I wanted her to design um, a skills role play on a family intervention, because around addiction. And because she's familiar, there's basically three main models of doing family interventions. One essentially is kind of brutal. It's basically, uh, and it doesn't have good outcomes. Another one's too permissive, and then there's a third one that basically is, considered the best practice. Dina having 10 years of clinical experience in the field, she knew what was the best approach, right? So I think that's what, the faculty SME is going to be bringing in. The instructional designer, their core competency is going to be in prompt engineering, and you know, essentially, there's kind of a question of how much of the course design is done by the faculty and how much is done by instructional designers. And over time, I would say in-person courses, usually we're done like almost 100% by faculty. Now, the average online course, the reality is it's like 70, 80% done by the instructional designer, even though most schools won't tell you that. But that's just the reality. It's going to be closer to 90% by the instructional designer, unless faculty gain some of these skills on prompt engineering and other tech skills, and essentially becoming an expert in instructional design. So, but what I think is going to happen is with AI, essentially the instructional designer is going to be able to do more of the work that a faculty's done. So, and unless faculty gain tech and instructional design and prompt engineering experience, that's just going to happen. So, all right. So NotebookLM Plus, some of the things that you can do with that is you can import larger documents. That's the main reason. It just came out a couple days ago. You get 5 times more audio overviews, notebooks and sources per notebook. Eventually, I would like to have this be a standard part for every course we design. Most schools will maintain a course blueprint that they use. I think it's probably going to be a best practice to always just have a NotebookLM Plus, um, of the course. And if I could do it, I would actually like to have all the content in the course in the NotebookLM Plus. Now, right now, I don't have the time to put all that in there, but in the future, that's what I'd like to have. Now, I'd like it to be easy to provide a public link to students and larger audiences for some courses. Honestly, probably 80% of courses, I'm not going to want to do this. And actually, I've thought about pedagogically in the long term where I'd probably go is I might provide this link to students after they finish the course as essentially an ongoing library that they can have access to. Because I think it'd be hugely valuable to the students. I don't want to give it to them before the course is over because the example I'd use, it's like you have you know, a exercise class in bicycling and you give everyone e-bikes. Now you tell them that they're supposed to pedal most of the time and not use the e-bike feature, but I've seen these mixed, pedal e-bikes. I've never seen anyone really pedaling on those things. They let the e-bike do the work. And the reality is, I think that's going to be the big problem on this, is that I think it's going to be difficult, um, in most contexts to give students an AI chatbot and still get them to actually do the pedaling of the work. And that's, how they're going to get the exercise. Now, I do want to go in and I want to jump into the Notebook LM for the family counseling, and I want to give a quick overview of this new interactive mode beta. There is um, the ability to have essentially like a podcast that summarizes the course. There's now this new interactive mode beta. So if you start this, and I'll go ahead and let me just make sure that I'm sharing my audio. Um, so share screen and let's see, share sound. Here we go. Um, okay, so if you play
Welcome to
this,
another deep dive. Today we're
can you
tackling
guys hear
family
this?
therapy and
It's not
substance
coming
use
through
disorder.
well.
Oh, a big one.
Yeah, well, we've got a ton of material.
We do.
Everything from like academic
Can you hear that
textbooks,
okay?
Right.
No?
training manuals, scholarly articles,
Mm-hmm.
even a YouTube video thrown in the mix.
Cool.
So we're really trying to give like a well-rounded view.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Oh, hey, our listener wants to join in. What's up?
Yeah, so I wanted to understand better what's really different about a Christian approach to family counseling.
That's a great question, and it's something we've touched on a little bit, but let's unpack that further.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction, especially as we're diving into all these different approaches to family therapy.
So, one thing was really interesting is that a Christian approach doesn't try to create a whole new model of family therapy from scratch.
Right, it's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
Exactly. Instead, it looks at what existing theories get right.
Okay, so it's about finding that overlap where different perspectives align.
Yeah, and the Christian approach integrates those insights with a Christian view of the person and the family.
So it's about seeing those commonalities through a Christian lens.
Exactly. It's less about technique and more about the underlying framework for understanding family relationships.
Okay, so what does that framework look like?
Well, it starts with an understanding of creation, the fall, redemption, and glorification.
So the big picture.
All right. So that's, where things are going. So you you can imagine in the future, there's a lot more that they can offer. They just added that. And So, yeah, so with that, let me just ask what questions you have. I know that some of you have done some experiments with AI, and Brian, I mentioned we did some alpha testing. But what questions or thoughts do you have on any of this?
Well, I just want to say, Andrew, that I love the way that you pulled all this together. I am just incredibly amazed at the level to which things have gotten in such a rapid time since the release
Mhm.
of the initial version of ChatGPT and now with Google launching its broader version of Gemini that you can access both through Google Workplace and through chat, and now also with a Notebook LM and the Learn About feature. And I hadn't delved into the Notebook LM to see what all it could do and to see that they also had this speech feature. I think that my biggest
Mhm.
concern will just be around the accuracy of the content
Mhm.
because it can produce things that, in Stephen Colbert's terms, are truthy. They have truthiness. Like to people
Yeah.
who are not in the field, they would seem to be true, but for people who are really in the field, they wouldn't be actually precisely accurate. And I think also it can speak in generalities that are very convincing, but it's when you get into the specifics of how to apply it into particular situations that'll be where I think instructors continue to be relevant to discriminating has this person really done the work to apply this into a particular situation? I think that correlates to what you were saying, Andrew, about assignments and how they're more valuable in producing the generalized summaries than they are
Mhm.
in producing the details of the assignments. So those are a few of my initial reflections on
Yeah.
it. But overall, I'm just really amazed at what the technology has gotten to, and I hope that with further refinements, they can address some of the issues with accuracy that they manifest.